Okay, you can go ahead, Brian.
Okay, thanks. I want to welcome everybody to the February 29th leap year Heritage Advisory Committee meeting. Um, the land on which we meet today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people. Do we have any additions to the agenda?
So I'm going to actually add 7.4, which is just a small update about the Downtown Heritage District study.
Right.
I had removed that accidentally, but I meant to leave it on. So just a small update.
Right. Okay. And you're talking about the Zion Church. Is that going to be?
I think we're going to lump that maybe in with the Tim Horton discussion.
Oh, okay.
One kind of leads into the other, I think, a little bit. But if we want to make it a separate item, we could. That's fine too.
Uh, well, if you think they're interrelated, then
I think
just
so,
leave it
because
the way it is.
I think it will be a larger discussion about what we want to do commemoration wise. So
Okay. So do I
Could we
have?
add a code of conduct, just general discussion, the new code of conduct?
sure, yeah, we can add that. That's not a problem.
Should we have that under business?
Yeah, we could make that 7.5 if you want.
Or leave it to the end, whatever.
No, we can add it under have it 7.5.
Okay,
Okay. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll do it.
Gail, thank you. And all in favor? Okay. Motion to adopt the minutes of February 1st. Unfortunately, I couldn't be at that meeting because I had a killer crusher work deadline that I was facing. Lorraine, are you making a motion?
No, I'm just mentioning that there's a couple spelling mistakes on page 4.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, through the chair, Rachel also sent me those spelling mistakes, so that was great. And then I also noticed that I had accidentally typed Elizabeth Street when I meant Embassy, I believe, for the list of properties. So I've fixed that already, but thanks.
And you've got the streeting committee, right? Mistake.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Those will all be fixed. Thanks.
And the page 4, there was just respect, and Giroux had too many letters.
Okay, sorry about that, Lorraine.
That's okay, no problem.
Robert?
7.2, 145 Main Street. The last sentence, paragraph 2, didn't make any sense. And the last paragraph or last sentence, paragraph 3 was cut off.
Oh,
and
okay.
did not finish.
Okay, thanks, Robert. I'll take a look at that, and I'll recirculate this to the group, just because there are a number of changes that need to be made. So,
thank you.
So should we have a motion that we're going to adopt them as amended minutes pending redistribution, or?
I'm okay with that as long as everybody else is. It doesn't sound like there's any content issues. It's more so just typos and making sure that the thoughts are fully fleshed out.
Okay. Right. So can I have a motion to adopt the amended minutes of February 1st? Robert?
Certainly.
Okay. And all in favor? Okay. Any declarations of interest for today's meeting? Seeing none, and I guess we can move on to our business at hand. Item 7.1, Fairview Park. We have Amanda here to razzle dazzle us.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for accommodating me on the agenda today. I think some of you might be getting tired of seeing me through either this committee or the Historic Welland Canals Task Force, but want to make sure we get things right. So as you know, I'm helping to coordinate a community vision and master plan for Fairview Park and John Page Park. You can flip the screen there, James. I'm I'm sure you're all familiar with the property in question, but we're just north of the Fairview Mall, with frontage on both Scott Street and Geneva Street. John Page Park is the smaller portion of the park that has playground equipment on it today, and stone remnants associated with the old NS&T rail bridge that crossed through the property north-south. And Fairview Park is the former Fairview Golf and Mini Putt course. Go ahead. So we've had a lot of community consultation on this project since early 2023, including a lot of online surveying, surveying out in the community, the immediate neighborhood. We've had a public open house in October where folks came in and they looked at 2 different alternative concept plans for the parks. And of course, we've had various meetings with yourselves, the Historic Welland Canals Task Force, and the Recreation Master Plan Advisory Committee. Go ahead. Thank you. If you'll recall, one of the concepts that we presented to the public was very much a community use or active use focused plan that included a skate park and pump track, playground, water play feature. And this was very much the preferred plan at when we went to public consultation. You can go to the next screen. And then our second plan was more heritage inspired, really seeking to commemorate the historic Welland Canal, Third Welland Canal, and the NS&T rail line. We heard that although the first concept was preferred, that heritage is important in the community, and it's desirable for us to incorporate commemoration into the design of the park. Next. So late last year, I guess, it was there's the date, August 31st, I came to the Heritage Advisory Committee and requested funds. And you were gracious in approving that request. We used that money to hire a consultant, a heritage consultant, to prepare something called a Heritage Interpretation Options Memo. And the intent of this was to make sure that we were getting the design of the park right in terms of the historic significance of previous uses on the park, in the park. And so they provided us, I'm just listing here the table of contents, but the full document will be on our project page online. They provided us with a whole list of ways to appropriately commemorate and interpret the history of the park, including, you know, things like plaques and timeline boards, interpretive panels, commemoration or interpretation, through landscape design, adaptive reuse of some of the physical elements that remain in the park, public art, thematic play equipment, these types of things. Next slide. So our urban design consultants, SGL, took all of the input from the community that we've had, the task force, the Heritage Advisory Committee, the Rec Master Plan Advisory Committee, and the Heritage Interpretations Options Memo, and they've compiled this draft master plan. This master plan will go out to the public one more time. That's slated for April 3rd. I can talk about that later. But I wanted to walk you through the plan for the park today and highlight some of the heritage commemoration and interpretation that we are incorporating into the park design. So very quick overview. At the Scott Street entrance, there are multi-use courts proposed and an entry feature. We have a sort of recreation of the rail line that traversed north-south through the park, including recreation of a bridge. So using the bridge remnants to support a pedestrian bridge. We have a playground sort of just east of that bridge. And then stacking along the old alignment of the canal is a water play feature or splash pad, for lack of a better word. We also have a skate park and pump track at the south end of the park, adjacent to Home Depot, where maybe a little bit more noise can be tolerated. And then adjacent to the skate park are some tennis or pickleball courts. And then it's about this point of the park where things get a bit quieter and maybe are targeted to an older demographic. There's areas that you can come and play chess. There are tennis, table tennis tables. Of course, we have our existing labyrinth, and that will be surrounded by an arboretum, community gardens, and then the option for some potential future parking. We have a little bit of parking for the park today, about 5 or 6 spaces. There's plenty of opportunity, in our opinion, next door at the mall for people to park, but we wanted to include that in the draft plan. You can go to the next screen. So I'm going to very specifically talk about heritage interpretation and commemoration. And these images that I show you are coming directly from our heritage consultants and their professional advice about how we can incorporate certain things into the park to really pay homage to the important history on the property. So starting up at the Scott Street entrance to the park, we have today just an existing sign, your standard City of St. Catharines park sign. We're really hoping to create more of an entry feature. So something where we can incorporate perhaps reclaimed remnants from some section of the Third Welland Canal. We were made aware that there are bollards from an old lock, a lock associated with the Third Welland Canal, that are laying over in a field. We have repurposed one of these in the past, and it's sitting in a park. There are also some cut stone pieces sitting on the fringe of the park. Apparently, they were excavated from the old lock when the Kiwanis apartment buildings were built. So perhaps an entry feature could incorporate these stacked in some manner. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Something else that the memo speaks to is that the city, through consultation with the community, of course, should be exploring the option to expand the John Page Park name to the entirety of the park, or some combination of both the existing park name and John Page. So maybe John Page Fairview Park or Fairview John Page. So that would be something that CRCS consults with the community on after the master plan exercise. But this was certainly a suggestion, a recommendation from our heritage professionals. Next slide. One of the largest, most tactile or obvious heritage interpretation features in the park would be this recreating the NS&T rail line through constructing a bridge over top of the existing remnants. So on site today, we have the northern abutment. If you can just circle that, James, maybe in the, yep. And then there's a center pier, which is underneath that orange bit, yes. And then what doesn't exist anymore is a southern abutment. So the southern abutment would have to be reconstructed in order to support this pedestrian bridge. This yellow line that I have on the screen is just to highlight the historic route of that rail line. And so beneath that, if that yellow line were to go away, we have a new pathway that's proposed for this end of the park. As you're on top of the bridge, there will be opportunity for some to observe a vista through the park. And the vista is intended to be directly down the path, the diagonal path of the old Welland Canal. Yeah, there's an opportunity to incorporate an observation deck or two on top of that bridge. maybe through bump outs or something like that. And this would be a good area to include storyboards or timeline maps about sort of the history of the property, both the rail history and the shipping history. Beneath the bridge, you'll see there's a circular concrete sort of patio area that's intended to be, a central gathering space, and it gives opportunity for people to explore around the remnants, which our heritage consultants have indicated is important in terms of, interpreting and having very physical, hands-on connection to the history of the park. I think we can go to the next slide. This came up through our consultation with you folks, but also the Welland Canals Task Force. Our heritage consultants have recommended that any play structures that we have in the park be thematic, whether they tie into the rail history or the shipping history of the site. So in the blow up there, you can see we're envisioning a large ship structure as the main playground, as the main play equipment. And there are 3 splash pad bubbles that are stacked through the park. In the middle bubble is where we imagine there would be the above grade sort of toys, buckets, water guns, these sorts of things. Again, we can incorporate sort of the theme of shipping into the design of those toys. We certainly were cognizant to do it in the design of the bubbles themselves. Like these 5 bubbles that you see, actually 5.5, it's a nod to the water, the history of water on the property. There's also, and this was James' suggestion, in the play surface of the playground itself, there's a differentiation in colors. So, as the playground sort of straddles the line of the north bank of the canal, we have a blue surface underneath the play equipment, and then the remainder of the playground is brown. I think you can go to the next slide. Some other recommendations from our consultants are regarding landscape design, and some of these may or may not be obvious to someone in the park, but they'll certainly cue someone's interest. Why are these features incorporated into the design of the park? So I have 2 yellow lines that signify the approximate location of the north and south banks of the canal. It's our intent to plant those lines, creating something called an allée in landscape architecture, where you're essentially you're framing the vista and the line of the canal, and it becomes very obvious to someone using the park that these trees are in this line for a purpose, and hopefully that cues them to go up and read more from the plaques or the storyboards about the history of the property. Within that sort of central seating area, the concrete seating area, there's an opportunity to etch in mapping of the Welland Canal systems, which we think is a really neat idea. I think we can go to the next slide. One more note about the trees. We want to be purposeful in the selection of the species of the trees, so that in the fall, they are a very vibrant color, and they certainly stick out from the rest of the many trees that will be planted in the park. You can move along now. Thank you. Another recommendation is heritage interpretation through public art. So we're all familiar with the recent installation of the tow horse in Port Dalhousie. This is something that the city could certainly incorporate into this park space. This is a massive 6.7 acre park. And there we have accommodated sort of 3 yellow stars. If you can see them, thank you. These are potential areas or locations for public art. And by public art, we're imagining something that is large, a sculpture, or this is an interesting example from another US city where there's a light installation of ghost ships traveling along their waterway. Next slide. When the recreation of the rail line and bridge takes place, we may have to disassemble some of the northern abutment just to achieve, like, they're quite high and we need to achieve an accessible grade up the abutments. And there are some at the top of that abutment, some stone blocks that aren't in the best condition. And so our heritage consultants took a look at that, and they recommended that it would be feasible and not detrimental from a heritage perspective to remove some of those blocks and incorporate them elsewhere into the park. The obvious reuse of those blocks would be seating. So there are some little gray specks on the screen encircled in yellow there, a potential area for some additional seating. We could also, those can be easily moved anywhere else on the plan where it might make sense from a heritage perspective. Maybe it makes sense to have them located closer to the northern abutment where they came from, for example. Okay, next. We have a few minor revisions to make to the draft master plan before we go out to the public. We expect that sometime next week, that plan itself and the heritage interpretation options memo will be put up on our St. Catharines Engage page. The address for that page is at the bottom of the screen there. And then we'll present that same plan on April 3rd at the Kiwanis Aquatics facility. And then we hope to go to council late this spring with our recommendation report and looking for their approval of the plan. And that concludes my presentation. I'm interested to hear what everybody might have to say about specific to the heritage interpretations options. So maybe, James, if you could back up to the first one of those slides, which is the park entrance feature. And then maybe we can just spend a minute or two on each of these slides. I can gather some notes from you folks or just your comments, and we'll go through those, and that will be the end of my presentation.
Okay, thanks, Amanda.
Yeah.
Can I maybe start out?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just have a couple of questions and a couple of observations.
Sure.
Number one, have we discussed what plaques we're going to put up, I guess, in this area? The most obvious would be a plaque for John Page, and maybe one just kind of a, high view discussion of the Third Welland Canal, the history of the Third Canal.
To answer the question, no. After the draft plan is approved, there's a whole there's several years of implementation that has to happen. So we're going to be breaking the park up into certain phases. And during one of those phases or multiple phases, we will focus on these types of details. So detailed design of that particular phase in the park, any signage that has to happen, plaques that need to be developed, these sorts of things.
Now you're talking about the bollards, and I know when we had this presentation for the canal task force,
Yes.
there was some concern on the part of Renee and Councillor Williamson about the state of those bollards that were, they wouldn't stand being moved into the park. Well, I wonder if they could still be moved and whether the bottom concrete part gets shaken apart or not. That surely could be reconstructed out of poured cement and stone bits and pieces, because that metal part, I assume it's metal on top, would be set into the concrete. So I mean, if they get shaken apart, it's no big deal, because the important part of the bollard is that metal portion. So they could always be reconstructed, and because if we're going to be reconstructing the south bridge abutment, Why can't we reconstruct part of a bollard? It's not going to be a big ticket item, I don't think.
Right.
And that way
Thank you.
we could still have those, and maybe one of the commemorative plaques could, like, here, you know, go onto the bollard.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the bollard, and I'm hoping that we can come up with a way to save them, whether it's in their entirety or some portion of them, and incorporate them into the park. Definitely.
Yep. And then the other point that I was going to make was about the design of the bridge that you're going to put in.
Yes.
We actually have pictures of the and photographic examples of the bridges that were used on the Third Welland Canal, and they had like posts on either end of the bridge that had like cables going from the top down to the rails on the bridge. Can the bridge have something like that incorporated into it? With
Yeah, so I've sent along the only photo that I have of the bridge. Unfortunately, it's not a great angle. We don't have a good photo of it, you know, as if you're traveling down the canal and the bridge was in place, sitting on its abutments. We have it from the top of the bridge. So it's very difficult to see what the guards look like, for example, but that is certainly something we're going to dive into further as we get into this custom design of a pedestrian bridge and incorporate, you know, at least I was thinking, but again, we'll rely on our heritage friends, that the guards be consistent so that we're not looking like at something that doesn't relate to what was there at all in terms of its, you know, architecture or design. If you have photos of the bridge, additional photos that you can share with me, I would love to see them and pass them on.
If you go over to the special collections at the downtown library,
I've been, yes.
And they've got their map drawers in the outside of the room.
Map drawers? Okay.
Yep. And there's a drawer that has Welland Canal specifications in it. And one of them has a fold-out plan from a report that John Page did about the construction of the third canal. And it has a beautiful drawing of what the bridge looked like.
Okay.
You know, front view, side view, top view, you know, the whole shebang.
I believe something similar might have been included in the stage 1 archaeological report that we had completed. This is sounding familiar to me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyway, so that might be a good, you know, basis for a bridge design too. It would be thematically correct as well.
Right.
Gail, you've had your hand up very patiently.
Well, I have a very simple and possibly stupid question. Is the only entranceway off Scott Street?
There are 2 entries to the property.
Okay.
The other is at Geneva. So we do have some room just off the city boulevard there to do something similar. We don't have the space for the grand design with like the flowering trees, but certainly that's another area we would have a park, as your standard park sign, and maybe incorporate some of these reclaimed items.
There's 2 ways to exit and enter then. Oh, good. And
onto city streets, and then there's a third into the mall.
Oh, that was my next question. And it's sort of worrisome because I think people that may not want to use the park will go cut through, but that's their option. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lorraine?
Amanda, you had also mentioned at our Welland Canal session that along the top edge there, the northern edge, I guess it is, where those black marks are, could possibly be entrances from the buildings, just to follow up on Gail's question. So I thought that was still, you know, a possibility to consider. I know Renee had said, you know, perhaps not, in terms of, you know, people cutting through there, but it also does give those people who live in the building the chance to enter directly from their backyard rather than walking all the way around. So I think that's still something to consider.
Yeah, and we'll continue to show that on the plan. And once we would get to the detailed design stage of that phase of the park development, we would have conversations with each of those building owners, condo owners, and whether they want to have some sort of gated keypad access to the park.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions or comments for Amanda? Oh, Maria?
She's muted. Oh, there.
You're muted, Maria.
I know, I'm trying to unmute.
There
Can
you
you
go.
hear me now? All right.
We can hear you.
Sorry about that. Amanda, wonderful presentation. I'm really excited about the plans that came out of that October open house. I attended that, and I'm thrilled to hear that the heritage component is being integrated so interestingly. I've got two quick questions for you.
Sure.
I can't recall the John Page name. I know he was either a council member or mayor in the history's past, or a significant individual. Was he the owner of that property, or was it someone else?
John Page was the chief engineer who designed that canal system.
I see. Okay, so there's the connection there. Gotcha. Thank you. And also, Amanda, the last time I visited this park was a few months ago, before the winter, shall we say, set in. And I noticed there were a number of homeless individuals using the structures such as they are for shelter and safety. And I know that concern came up at the open house. Do you know what provisions might be made to take their needs into consideration when this renovation of the park eventually progresses?
I don't know specifically what council's strategies are with respect to some of the problems that people with homelessness, experiencing homelessness, are facing. We acknowledge that there are people who are living in the park right now. I think you can attribute that, partially at least, to the fact that it's such a large open space with not a lot going on. Yes, people traverse the park, but it's fairly rare, the many times I've been there, that I've actually seen families playing in children or families playing in the sort of southeast quadrant of the park, which tends to be where people who are living in the park are camping out. I think from our perspective, our job is to activate the park and have more eyes in the park, so that the probability of that happening decreases. Right now, in terms of the current situation that's happening with these folks living in the park, we're not in a position to kick people out of the park unless we have some alternate arrangement for them in terms of housing. You may have seen that maybe recently in the news that the Niagara region is constructing a temporary homeless shelter in the downtown near the former Gale Center there. So, I mean, obviously, the matter of homelessness and addiction is a high priority for government. It's just not an area of my expertise. I apologize. And of course, I know that there's things happening in the background, and funding is needed and all of these things. But from our perspective, we hope to, through design and animation of the park, make it a safer place.
Thank you, Amanda.
Okay. Councillor Garcia.
Mr. Chair, and just a couple of comments on the question that Maria just asked. Housing and homelessness is primarily a responsibility of Niagara Regional Government. However, our government tries to cooperate with them at everything possible, and we do invest funds in this as well. And we do cooperate closely with a number of agencies that are trying to deal with this. But Amanda is exactly right that legally, we and the region are not allowed to remove encampments or people from who are homeless unless there is a shelter space they can go to, which is not always available. And hopefully that new facility on Reardon Street there will help. It's 46 units, if I remember. A couple of other comments. When Lorraine and I were at the Welland Canals Task Force and we heard this presentation, Councillor Williamson, particularly, who's not here right now, did express a concern about the whole plan, about it being a little too busy and not keeping enough of the green space. So just sharing that for this committee so that you know that that was a concern, and I believe it was shared by the chair of the committee as well. Thank you.
Lorraine, you've got another comment?
Yeah, just I was going to go a different direction, but because Carlos mentioned that, I thought I'll also mention the fact that I was worried about the lack of sort of greenery. You know, the native plants. We had talked about, you know, should we bring an Indigenous person in to talk about plants? Are there going to be sort of resting spots? Another thing I was concerned about, this, and this is the final one I'll mention, was you had mentioned equipment, Amanda. And so I've been thinking more about that. And you were thinking about having equipment for seniors, which I love the idea of having that. You know, so you see those, and there's a park in Pelham where they have it, and there's parks in Toronto, downtown Toronto, where you see it, where people could, you know, do yoga, or people could do Tai Chi, or people could use machines, you know, just some machines, sort of like exercise machines that can function outside. But I've been thinking more about the idea of spreading them out, and I'm really worried about that in terms of people operating them by themselves if they were spread out. So I really want to give a little further attention to that concern that I had. But basically, what I was going to say when at first was that, you know what? Thank you for this presentation, Amanda. I don't know why, but I feel like I heard things that I didn't hear around the first time, and maybe it's because I was thinking about one of the things you had said, and I missed some of the pieces. So I love the heritage pieces that you've given presentation to. The one thing I wanted to ask more about was that, you know, how you had mentioned the ghost ships?
Yes.
The ghost ship. Could you go to that slide, James, please? I'm just wondering how that would function. Would it just be in the evening? Would it be an independent presentation that would just be, you could see from 360 degrees, or like, how does that work?
First of all, I should clarify that this hasn't been chosen to be installed in this
No,
park.
no,
These
no.
are these are public art options.
Right.
Interesting examples that are found elsewhere, one locally and one in the US. It's a light installation that happens from grade. And it's obviously only lit in the evening, so you can see it, and yeah, it's visible from 360 degrees.
Okay, I guess I'm just thinking, you know, I think the park would probably get most of its attention during the day. I mean, I love the idea of this. So it'd be kind of nice if it was going to be there, if it was sort of towards the outside of the park, and so that people just, you know, driving by or whatever could happen to see it. That would be a nice sort of feature for it. But okay, well, thanks very much. And again, Amanda, I heard things that I didn't hear before, and it was great.
Thank you. I have purposely today really honed in on these heritage interpretations options. Whereas when we met the last time at the task force, it was more of an overall view of the recreation facilities with a couple of highlights on heritage. So I'm glad you got a little bit more information out
I did.
today.
Thank you.
Yep.
A couple of things that sort of popped into my mind as you know, the other committee members were talking, because of course, you know, with me being concerned with archaeology and whatnot, in the area where the splash pads and stuff are going to be, if there's going to be any digging going on in there, because that's right in the prism of the canal area. I don't know how deep you're going to be going down, but I mean, that canal, of course, was filled in with garbage.
Right.
So if there's any really funky trash that gets turned up, is there any plan to offer it to the museum and say, look what came out of the canal prism? Or would there be some opportunity to display it within the park, make something with a shatterproof plexiglass display window that people can say, oh, look what was found here?
You don't have to convince me that that's a great idea at all. I would be really excited if when we were doing some excavation for the splash pad or the playground, we came across something interesting. For the committee's understanding, though, we have done a stage 1 and a stage 2 archaeological study. We have done test pit digging in the site. Archaeologists were on site last summer. There was nothing found at that time. So they have told us there's a low probability of coming across something during excavation, but certainly, Brian, the archaeological potential would be something that we would flag for our contractors, that if there is something interesting that pops up when they're digging, we can be on site and take a look at it.
Yeah, because I mean, when you do test pitting, I mean, you're not covering the entire site. You're just doing, a test pit here, test pit there, as James can attest to. Whereas, here where you're going to be doing a lot of, excavating in a certain area, there might be the possibility that something would pop up. The other thing that sort of crossed my mind, that maybe we could use in this park as extra seating, and it's contemporary with the canal construction and the time that it was being used. In Centennial Park, or as it's now known, Pierpoint Park, at the far end, there's all kinds of ruinous column drums, sculpted stone column drums that came off a downtown building. Would this be kind of the sort of place where they could be some of the better ones moved and used as seating?
I think I would defer to James on that. From a heritage perspective, I think there's probably some best practice in terms of relocating items that aren't necessarily native to a site. James,
Right.
do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, through the chair, Amanda's spot on. I think you wouldn't want to confuse people and make them think that those columns came from this space or are associated with the canal. So we'd have to be really careful about that. I'm not sure what state they're in. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Andrew has one of the columns now. Is that right, Andrew? I think. Is Andrew in the meeting?
Yeah, I
Andrew
am
was
sorry. I
here.
just had to find my unmute button. Yeah, we have some of the columns from the TD Bank building. Yeah, so are those the ones you're referring to?
Yeah, I believe those are the ones that you're referring to, right, Brian?
Yep.
Yeah, we have several of those, or others. Yeah, the other ones are still back where they started. We're looking for those potentially to add those to what we're going to use them for. But obviously, if there's another use as well, that's another matter.
I mean,
Thanks,
it would
Andrew.
be easy enough. It would be easy enough to identify. Put a little, marker on them saying, these are from, the TD Bank building. But I mean, they would make, ideal kind of nice, ornate, sculpted seating elements. But it's just a thought. I thought I'd, toss it out there.
There's a lot of interesting things you could do with them for sure.
Yep. Holly?
Yeah, I have a question, Amanda. Thank you for your presentation. I missed a little part of it logging on. Where's the parking for this park? If I wanted to come visit this park, come to the splash pad, come to look at the playground, where do I park for this park?
So there is some existing parking off of Geneva Street, and we have a shared driveway with Kiwanis Apartments. So if you travel down that driveway, there are about 5 or 6 spaces there today. The plan that you're looking at right now does show for a bit of an extension of that parking. Parking was not a desirable element when we went out for community consultation. People didn't want to see the park eaten up, the park green space eaten up with parking. It's our intent to negotiate leasing some parking from the Fairview Mall to the south. They have plenty of it. And we had historically leased parking spaces from them when the golf course was running.
Because where there's like the Avondale store with the plaza down by Scott Street there, because that's kind of like the entrance. Probably people would want to come in to use the splash pad. Yeah, that's just one of my questions. Because as I was listening to the presentation, you want to attract people to the park. I was up in Thorold at the Battle of Beaver Dams Park, and they built like an amphitheater with kind of rocks set in as seating, and they have like a stage even for even bringing some music, which is kind of neat. And then they put parking, so I know people go to like the JC Park, they park their car, they go for a walk, they go tobogganing. Not everybody can park by the Fairview Mall and walk through there. That's just why I was just asking that question.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so do we have any other questions for Amanda? And if not, then I guess we would need a motion to receive Amanda's presentation. Oh, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I do have one question. A few questions have already been answered by other people's questions. No, you did. I know nothing's in stone, but you did mention pickleball courts. Maybe I'm off the pulse with pickleball. Does it have longevity or like for that sport to invest in? I don't know if it's the same size as a tennis court, so you can maybe transfer lines or something like that, or
You can design a tennis court to have pickleball court lines overlaid.
Okay.
So there's been no firm decision on what those courts will be, whether they're strictly tennis or strictly pickleball or a combination of them both. But yeah, this plan is intended to provide a vision for the park for the next 10 years while we're making decisions about actually investing and doing the detailed design. And things can change.
Right.
Throughout the course of that, right? It's not intended to be a set in stone plan. It's more of a vision. And so at each of the stages where we're designing the phases, we'll be considering those types of things, like what is the popularity, what is the demand, what do our strategic documents say? We do have a recreation and facility and programming master plan that gives us guidance on all of our different types of recreation facilities and how many we need and where we should be putting them. That's being updated next year. We're going to start to update that plan. Certainly pickleball courts and tennis courts will be addressed in there. And similarly, like we have we're going to be doing something called a playing field strategy where we need to better understand, current trends in softball, hardball, soccer, these types of things. So that's work that CRCS is constantly doing.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I guess that would cover. I know a lot of municipalities, if they have a splash pad now, it's used. That's the splash pad is used in summer, and it can be converted to ice rink in the winter, too.
Yeah. Yes, we've seen that in other places. We also are working on. We're starting to do the work. I mean, council's going to want to know the answers about feasibility of that sort of thing in St. Catharines. We have the volunteer rink program across St. Catharines. There wasn't a lot of uptake this year. We believe that's in part because of our changing climate and how, it's difficult to keep a rink frozen throughout the winter for more than a couple of weeks at a time at best.
Right.
So it's another one of these things that we have to keep an eye on and understand, like emerging trends and the realities of those types of things.
Okay, thanks. Overall, it's a good plan. I like
Thanks, Mark.
A lot of things were considered. A lot of heritage things were considered, and I think that's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have a motion to receive Amanda's report?
I didn't craft one for the screen, but it's just a simple motion to receive the information from Amanda.
Right. Okay, I think I saw Robert's hand go up first on that. You got to be quicker than that, Andrew. So all in favor? Okay, done. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Have a
thanks,
good
Amanda.
afternoon. Yep.
Okay, so moving on to item 7.2, the Tim Hortons commemoration.
Yeah, so through the chair, we received a request through the mayor's office from someone in the community. They were wondering if the Heritage Committee had interest in commemorating it was last week was the 50th anniversary of Tim Horton's death. Tim Horton passed away on the QEW in St. Catharines, and so that's why they asked if we would have any interest in commemorating that. Um, I don't know how much people know about Tim Horton beyond, he was a famous hockey player, and obviously Tim Hortons is a internationally recognized brand associated with Canada. I don't know a lot about his link to St. Catharines beyond his death. I don't think there's a very strong link there. And then beyond that, I also because of the way he died, and I don't know how much people know about that, but it was a driving under the influence, and he was found to be under the influence of alcohol and barbiturates, and so it's kind of a tough thing to commemorate, I guess, or find a good story to tell there. And so I think it's a challenging thing for us as a group to suggest that we should commemorate, but I'll open it up to everybody because if we do as a group feel strongly enough about it, we certainly can try to find a way to frame a plaque that tells his story in a way that reflects him as a person, I guess you could say. So I'll turn to the floor.
Yep, Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. James, the Standard had an interesting article commemorating the 50th anniversary of the death the other day. If you want to look that up, it gives a lot of history. He is actually from Northern Ontario. He wasn't born locally. And then they talk about the fact that he did, in fact, participated in the first Tim Hortons donut shop in '64, along with another partner who eventually was bought out by Ron Joyce, who is the guy that everybody knows. But you make some good points as to whether, we do want to commemorate something like that. But I'll leave it up to the committee to comment.
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor. I actually didn't see that article, so I'll check that out. Thank you.
Lorraine?
It was a very good article that really explained everything, James, to have a look at. But I would just say, supporting what you said, that he's not from the area, and that would we commemorate his death from intoxicated driving. And I would add that the first Tim Hortons was not in this location, so it wasn't in St. Catharines. So my preference would be that we maybe not commemorate him. Recognize his contribution to Canadian life, perhaps, but not to commemorate Tim Hortons specifically.
Yeah, wasn't the first Tim Hortons in Hamilton or Stony Creek or something like that?
Hamilton, I think.
Yeah, it's in Hamilton.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was, so that's I think another factor of why I wouldn't necessarily support that.
Gail?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. That article was in the Toronto Star. It's huge. It's a huge article, so please look it up. And then it was repeated in the St. Catharines Standard, full of information of what happened to the car. The only connection we have really is that the wreck of the car sat in a parking lot off Ontario Street, I believe, for several days before it was hauled away.
Simpsons.
Right? Yes, that's right. Yeah, I was reading the article. It's quite interesting. And recently, Tammy Kate was good enough to remind us all of how we have a street naming policy in the Heritage Committee, and I don't think this fits at all with that. And I want to thank Tammy Kate. She's not here today, but for reminding us of what the historic names we could really honor. We have not yet done so, but we could. So I agree with everyone else at this point to just let this one go.
Andrew?
I just want to reiterate, I share the same reservations given the circumstances of his death. reservations against commemorating it. I also would say, and trying to be diplomatic about this, but I think Tim Hortons most famous because someone else operated a very successful business with his name on it. So those are the two reasons. But at the same time, I'll play devil's advocate for a moment and just say that historical plaques shouldn't always be only about the good things that have happened, and sometimes commemorating something tragic can be a teaching moment. I'm not entirely sure how to do that in this case, and I'm not sure how to do it without potentially disparaging his name, which is not necessarily something we want to do either. It's unfortunate, sad that someone died under those circumstances, but maybe better left alone.
My feeling was pretty much the same, that had Tim Horton been a native of the city, and maybe if the first donut shop had been here, and the fact that he died here, those would be factors to dictate maybe having a plaque here. But just by virtue of the fact that he died at Lake Street, nah, I don't think so. So it sounds like the committee's sort of leaning towards, not doing anything for this commemoration. So should we have a motion that we're not willing to consider it?
Yeah, I will put one up on the screen. So as per usual, it has to be in a
positive,
frame it in a positive way, but we can vote against it essentially. So it says that the SCHAC recommends commemorating the death of Tim Horton with a plaque. And so then we can vote in favor or against that.
So then I guess we need someone to make this motion, which I guess, to be devil's advocate, I guess I could make the motion. And then everybody, all in favor of the motion? Not seeing anybody voting in favor of it, so I guess it didn't pass. What a surprise.
Well, thank you for that. And
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
Just for the committee's information, since everybody was reluctant to make that motion, in case you're not, please be aware that the fact that you make a motion doesn't mean that you can't vote against it.
Thank you, Councillor. That's appreciated. So kind of a second kind of topic to talk about related to commemoration. I just wanted to give everybody an update about the Zion Baptist Church. So we had members of their congregation attend our meeting not too long ago, and essentially requesting the committee to provide a plaque for them. And so their story is that the church originally was located on Geneva Street, not far from the Salem Chapel. It was torn down in 1958, so over 50 years ago, over 60 years ago. They've relocated. They're on Raymond Street. They're in a small house there. A lot of the conversation was about where would the plaque go? Would it go on to Geneva Street? Would it be on Raymond Street? And then part of the issue as well is that because the property is owned by a private owner, we would have to engage a private owner to find out if they had any interest in being the home of the plaque or installing a plaque on their property. So after a little bit of time, I was able to get in touch with the owner of where the Salem Chapel stood. There's a lot of complications around his property, and he's not really interested in this at the moment. Maybe down the road, but at least right now, not able to put a plaque there. I also reached out to the neighbor to find out if they would have any interest, because if we could get a plaque kind of close to the property, we could still kind of tell that story. But they felt strongly that the plaque should belong on the actual church property and not theirs, which I completely appreciate and can understand. So essentially right now we're left without a location on Geneva Street for this plaque. So I guess part two of the discussion that we had previously was, would a plaque on Raymond Street in front of where the congregation meets now, would that be sufficient? At the time, it sounded like the group was opposed to that idea. We really wanted to see it on Geneva, but in light of all that information, I just wanted to throw it back out to the group to see if the Raymond Street location was something that we wanted to pursue, or if we felt that this is something that we'll wait. Could be a couple years. We don't know when it might be, but we'll wait till further down the road to put the plaque in the proper spot. So I'll open up this to the floor.
Would there be any merit in approaching the BME church and having a church, a plaque for the Zion Church temporarily on their property, and say, hey, this was another church that served the Black community. It was like 300 feet that way, and and maybe let the BME know that, well, the plaque is only here temporarily, and once we get this all straightened out, it can be moved to further up Geneva Street or on Raymond Street or whatever. That way, it's still tying in with Black history in the early Black community.
Yeah, through the chair, I certainly think that's a possibility. I don't know if they would be receptive to it. We can reach out to them and ask. It doesn't hurt to ask, and it might be a solution to this problem. Yeah.
Lorraine?
I'll reach out to them.
The person making the presentation indicated, I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain with this, that the location on Raymond Street isn't a stable location. They didn't anticipate that they would be able to maintain it. And so I think that was another reason why we were reluctant to put the plaque there. I also think, didn't he say that there wasn't much attendance there, or they thought they could be moving, so it's sort of was sounded like it was a temporary location?
Yeah, through the chair, I think their congregation is pretty small, and I don't know how big it is, to be honest. There's 3 members at the very least, but that might not be enough to make it self-sustaining, right? So.
Well, and as far as it being a temporary location, I mean, they've been there as long as I can remember. So, like, 60 years they've been there. So how temporary is temporary?
Everything's temporary.
Andrew?
I was just going to add to that I think one of the discussion points around that was that location is so set back that there's very little public traffic there. So the purpose of the plaque is public awareness. If we put it where nobody's going to see it, what's the point? So my advice would be let's be patient and wait for the opportunity to do it right. It's definitely well worth commemoration, and if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well.
Okay, so I guess we should maybe have a motion that we're going to, or recommend that we defer this to a future date.
We can defer it. I have a motion crafted right now that specifically focusing on Raymond Street, because I'd like to give feedback to the church members and let them know what our thoughts were on the Raymond Street location. And through that, we can then say that we'll explore the opportunity of a plaque on Geneva Street at a later date when it makes sense or when it's feasible.
So could that be moved, appended to this?
Yep,
either plaquing at Raymond Street or Geneva Street at a future date?
But wait a minute.
Yeah, it has to be different. Yeah.
No, I thought, is it the Raymond motion one that we would turn down, perhaps?
I think that's why it would have to be separate. Yes. So
Yeah,
we would vote on this, and then perhaps there would be a second motion that the SHAC recommends installing the plaque on Geneva Street at a later date.
I'm glad Carlos explained that if you make the motion, you don't have to necessarily vote for it. I didn't realize that before.
Okay, so we have 2 motions on the screen now. So we have the first motion that the SCHAC recommends commemorating the Zion Baptist Church with a plaque at its current location on Raymond Street. So we can vote on that first, and then depending on how that goes, we can move on to the second one. So I'll stop sharing so we can do the vote.
Okay, so I guess we need someone to make the first motion.
Oh, okay. Do you want to, Maria?
Okay. So all in favor of said motion?
1 second. I'm just trying to speak. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry to interject at this point. Is there a possibility of also adding another motion about to flesh out Brian's idea of approaching the BME church to see if that would be a possibility. I guess that would also involve seeing if that was acceptable to the congregation at the Zion Baptist Church. But I wonder if there's some way we could offer that as another option.
But the way, if James, with the second motion, you're saying to have a plaque on Geneva Street, could that sort of be a vague way of getting around that?
I think
I
through the
mean,
chair,
B&E is on Geneva as well.
yeah, through the chair, I think maybe what I'll do is I'll reach out to the BME church and see if they have any interest. If they do have interest, then it's really quickly we can pass another motion down the road, right? And but I don't think I need a motion to be passed for direction for me to just go and chat with them and see if they would have interest. So I think that would be
Okay.
kind of the cleanest way to do it.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, so Maria, you're making the motion for the first one for Raymond Street. Okay, so all in favor of that motion? Doesn't look like it passed.
Two in a
So
row.
I can make the one for the second one if you want.
okay, thank you, Lorraine.
Yeah, so the second one says that the SCHAC recommends commemorating the Zion Baptist Church with a plaque on Geneva Street in the location of the original church at a later date.
So if there's no questions or comments about that motion, then I guess all in favor of that one. Okay, that's done. Yeah, when it comes time to putting up that plaque, whenever it's done, there's a couple of really good pictures of that church. You know, it's in some ways I think it was a more, I hate to say it, a more attractive church than the BME because they had like a Palladian window on the front.
Brian, do you have those pictures?
I do.
I'd be interested in seeing them.
Yep. The one is actually rather sad. It was taken just before the church was to be demolished, and the bottom parts of the windows were boarded up, and the panes of glass in the upper ones were all smashed out. I guess people have been, throwing rocks at the building. Yeah, it's a shame that it went down, but these things happen.
I actually, if we want to take a second, I have the picture right here.
Oh,
I'll
do you?
show it. Yeah, I'll happy to show it to the group. The museum did a
Yeah.
blog article about the church not too long ago. I'll also send a link to everybody so that you can see it a little bit better and read the article. But this is essentially 1955, about 3 years before it was torn down. So in 1955, it was already in pretty rough shape. Most of the windows are broken. Yeah. But I'll circulate this article to the group because I imagine everybody would like to read a little bit more about it.
And I think I've got a picture of probably an Emancipation Day parade going down Geneva Street past this building when it was still being used. And then I've got a picture of it when it was being demolished. So you could actually see the windows were out and you could see, parts of the interior walls that were, ripped open. So if I find those, I can send them as well.
thank you.
Okay, item 7.3, the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario regarding Bill 23. James, you're going to talk about that?
Yep. So through the chair, the ACO, the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, has sent out kind of a all points bulletin to all heritage committees across the province, requesting that they pass a motion asking their councils to then ask the province to extend the deadline for listed properties to lose their heritage status, which is going to happen at the end of this year as a result of Bill 23. So they've crafted a motion for us, which is nice of them. And I'll put that up on the screen and kind of explain a little bit about it. But essentially what we'll do is vote for this motion and then it will go to council. And if I'm not mistaken, Councillor Garcia, you're bringing a motion or you have brought a motion to council. And so I don't know if you want to speak to that, Councillor, to let everybody know what's happening with that one.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, James. What I've discussed this with the city clerk, and what I agreed to is it is listed in council correspondence, and then I will identify it and pull it for quote endorsement, which the clerk says has the same effect as an actual motion of council, because it means that everything is sent to the ministry as ACO would like. And at the time, so this is this coming Monday, I will ask, while we're endorsing this, I will ask Director Kite if she's there, or if not, you or Margaret, just to comment on the importance of supporting this and how it can help us, because the 2-year deadline is fast approaching and it's so unrealistic, and it's going to put heritage in real danger across the province.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, through the chair, it's about 35,000 properties across the province that are going to be affected at the end of the month. And in talking to a lot of my colleagues, I guess, at other municipalities, a lot of people are kind of behind the 8 ball right now. It's a lot of work for a lot of municipalities, and some municipalities don't have heritage planners, so it's heritage committees that are having to take on the load of the work, which is really challenging to do. So more time would certainly be appreciated, and yes, it's hopefully with the amount of municipalities that'll be putting this forward, maybe we'll see some movement there. But I don't know if there are any questions, but I was going to put the motion up on the screen and kind of explain what's in it, if that would help. Just hold on 1 second. So essentially the motion, this is a very formal motion, a lot more formal than we typically would have, but what they've done is they've outlined essentially the changes that were proposed as part of Bill 23, stating that properties on the Heritage Register would lose their status at the end of 2024, so before January 1st. They've requested as part of this that the deadline essentially be amended and changed to January 1st, 2030. So that would essentially give an extra 5 years. So the motion would be that that this committee, or the SCHAC, shall request council to authorize the mayor to promptly send a letter to Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, and Michael Ford, Minister of Citizenship and Multiculturalism, requesting that section or subsection 2716 of the Ontario Heritage Act be amended to extend the above noted deadline for 5 years, from January 1st, 2025 to January 1st, 2030. I don't know if there are any questions. I'm happy to try to address them.
So are you filling in, what is this part about the above noted work involving blank listed properties?
Yeah, it's essentially the number of properties in your municipality. So in our case, it's 160 that are listed. And what they've suggested here is that the above noted work involving 160 listed properties in this municipality is extremely time consuming and cannot be completed by the end of this year with the limited municipal resources available. So essentially what they're saying is that because most municipalities don't have the ability to deal with the resources or with the amount of culture heritage resources that they have on the register, that it's simply not a fair timeline.
James, since the agenda has already been published, so therefore this motion from the committee won't be on it. Again, I would ask that either you or Director Kite or Margaret, who attends, when I ask the question, you can read that section of the motion that the committee passed, so the council is aware of it.
Yes, through the chair. I think all 3 of us will be at the meeting, so won't be a problem at all.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So I think we'll need a member to make the motion.
I have raised my hand.
Have you indeed?
I would very much like to make the motion because I'm a personal member of the Ontario Conservancy and have been for years. So I know Carlos probably is as well on his own, but I think I'm the only one of this committee that's an actual member. So I would like to make the motion.
Is that a conflict of interest?
Well, I didn't, no remuneration. No. No.
Okay. So Gail's making the motion, and all in favor of the motion? Okay, done. Item 7.4, an update on the downtown HCD. James, take it away.
So through the chair, I just have a really short update. So last meeting, our consultants were here and they did a presentation, which was really great. And essentially, since then, we've been hard at work, or they've been hard at work at least, and I've been helping them as well. Essentially, getting things going, getting the ball rolling. It's a massive project, but one of the key kind of dates that we had was earlier this week on Monday. We met with the downtown BIA and their board members, and it was a really positive meeting. It went really well. They're really excited about the idea. There's always questions and people who have concerns, but generally we thought that the meeting went really, really well. The next step is going to be to have a public meeting, which will be open up to members of the BIA and also the general public, and that will be sometime in March. We haven't set a date yet. But it'll probably be after March break. We want to make sure we avoid that conflict. And the other thing I want to mention to everybody is that at the last meeting, the consultants asked if there was any material that anybody wanted to have passed along to them, whether it's books or articles or just interesting information that you might have had about any particular property. You're still welcome to do that. If you want to send it to me, just send it by email. And I'll pass along that information to our consultants. It looks like they've already gotten started on doing a lot of historical research, but every little bit helps, and you never know what tidbits of information might come out of information that they didn't have already, right? So welcome that information. Feel free to send it at any time, and I'll pass it along. But I'll also let everybody know when the public meeting is, the first public meeting in March. Hopefully we'll have that scheduled pretty soon.
If we don't attend the public meeting, is there a link that we can send comments into City Hall electronically?
Yep, through the chair. Hopefully by next week, we'll have a page on our Engage STC website, and there will be all sorts of information and opportunities to provide comment and feedback on there. So yeah, hopefully it'll be up next week. But I'll pass that around to everybody as well, because I'd like for all of you to be able to circulate it to your networks as well to get their feedback, right? So yeah.
Thanks. Lorraine?
One of the things I had asked about at the last meeting, I asked the group, was would we be informed of any sort of tours of the downtown they were taking, or any public meetings with not a general public meeting, but a meeting with one of the homeowners or one of the business owners, and they had said that they would let us know about that. Would that be at the public meeting, James?
Through the chair, I think they're going to get started on actual field work in March, which involves walking around and taking photos of everything and documenting the downtown. So I don't know what that date will be. I'm meeting with them again. We do kind of every other week we meet and kind of have a little debrief on how things are going. So I'll see if they've solidified a date when I chat with them next week. And if they have, then I'll pass it around to everybody, and I'll make sure that you're aware of it.
Thank you.
Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to share with the committee, as most of you know, the process will be, there has to be a heritage designation study, which is, if you remember, we met the consultants at another meeting and so on. So they'll be coming up with that study and recommendation. Eventually, a recommendation will go to council, which we hope will be positive. At that time, we will certainly need some good presentations to council, because the history has been, and I'm sorry our friend Frank Kaplan is not here, who passed away, who was chair of the committee for a long time, because he was so aware of this. Even though the Heritage Act has allowed for a long time for properties to be designated without the approval of the owners, St. Catharines has really lagged in that area, and for the longest time would not even go there, because the feeling was that the owner has to agree. Now, a lot of this is based on misconceptions about what heritage designation does, and an assumption that it's going to devalue properties and so on, something that has been debunked several times. But just be aware that that will be a challenge, because there will be arguments that I'm sure out of this many properties, there will be some people who would not agree with whatever the consultant recommends. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
No, communication is key.
Yes, and through the chair, our meeting earlier this week with the BIA talked a lot about those myths, or we had a lot of good conversations about that, and because people aren't familiar with heritage, right? And so when they hear it, they think certain things. But no, it was really positive, and our consultant in particular was able to answer a lot of questions really great. So
Um, so any further questions about that? None? So I guess we need a motion to receive.
yeah, that would be great. Just a easy motion. Yep.
Anybody? Don't all jump at once. Andrew? Okay. And all in favor? Done. Okay. Item 7.5. Gail, you wanted to talk about the code of conduct issue?
Very, yeah, a very general question. When I read it, it seemed about 6 major cities had been um, involved or had been looked at. Of the many, I don't know, there's something like 56 municipalities in Ontario, and so through you, Brian, to James, were all of the municipalities in Ontario looked at for this code of conduct, and if or how many of them have advisory committees and task forces? How much
So
research, in general, how much research was done?
So through the chair, I actually don't know the answer to that, but I will get that for you because that would be through our clerk's office. They would have done a lot of that research and legwork. So I'll have to get back to you, but I'll reach out to them and see if they have a response, and then I can either circulate it by email or I can let you know at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And are we supposed to be making some kind of formal response about, criticisms of the code of conduct, or do we just, if we don't, if we have no comments to make, just, I guess, say nothing?
Yeah, through the chair, I think that's the expectation. Yeah, if you do have anything, by all means, all feedback is good feedback. But if you don't have anything to add, then don't feel pressured to do so.
So we don't need any kind of motion or anything to receive, or just we've discussed it.
Yep, I'll reach out to them and hopefully have a response for you. I'll circulate it by email next week because it seems like something that could be answered pretty quickly.
Cool. I guess moving on to the designations. We're talking about the synagogue at this point.
Yeah, so through the chair, this month, in lieu of a meeting, we actually did a little bit of a site visit, a field trip out to the synagogue, and it was a great meeting, a great kind of tour we were given of the synagogue, and essentially it's kind of the first step towards the designation of it. The goal, hopefully, is to have it designated during the summer. Their 100th anniversary, they're ramping up for some pretty big events later in the summer, and so we're hoping we can have the designation lined up in time for when those get going. So yeah, it was. I've had a chance to go into the synagogue a number of times now, but I think a couple members probably had never been in there before, and it's a pretty stunning space. And Howard, who runs the synagogue, gave us a really great tour. So I don't know if any of the members of the designation subcommittee want to kind of speak to this, but essentially that's the update from that subcommittee.
I think it was a really great tour that we had, and the nice part about that was that we got to see extra parts of the interior of the building that I hadn't seen before, and Howard also explained different aspects of the history that I hadn't heard that he hadn't mentioned prior to that. I've already started work on the title search for the property, and it's a little bit murky in the 1860s time period because we're going from a CP2 property to a couple of lots on the Merritt and Phelps plan 24, and then we go back into a township lot. And it's that Merritt and Phelps plan that is really, it's a dog's breakfast. to to search, but I think I've got it straightened out. So I'm going to try and get that written up maybe in time for the next committee meeting, or certainly
Great.
to get it to you, James.
Yeah, no, that's appreciated. And it's if it's a dog's breakfast for you and you're having trouble with it, I don't know where I would even start. So I really appreciate the help, and I think all the subcommittee members appreciate the work that you put into it. So thanks.
I mean, but the main thing is because it's like lots 4 and 5 on Church Street, but Church Street was called Academy Street at one point. And then some of the entries are not specific about whether you're talking about lot 4 and 5 on the north side of the street or on the south side of the street. So it's a matter of trying to disentangle all that stuff and keeping in mind that Academy equals church at that particular, historic junction. Gail.
Yeah, I think James, through you, Brian, you have Howard's book, right? Yourself?
Yeah, he gave me a copy, and that's
Okay,
what we're
okay.
leaning on quite a bit for
Okay.
a lot of the historical
Yeah,
aspects of the report because it's so
yeah.
thorough.
I'd be
So
glad to lend it to anybody. I've been in the synagogue many times, but I would be glad to lend it to anybody here on the committee that would like to see it. So just let me know if you'd like to. I will arrange that. Okay, thanks.
and likewise, if any of our members want to go to the synagogue and get a little mini tour, I have no doubt that Howard would be happy to show you the building. He's been really great and really flexible with us, and so yeah, just let me know and I can arrange that for you.
Yeah, I mean, Howard is so enthusiastic about the building and its history, and he's just a great spokesperson for the synagogue and the congregation. So I guess we need a motion to receive that. Wow, I'm seeing all kinds of hands going up. Mark, did you want to make the motion, or did you have a question?
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so all in favor of receiving the report? None. Was that it for designations?
Mhm.
Okay. We have no correspondence, I don't think, unless anybody has anything that they want to bring up. So our next meeting will be on March the 28th. Same bat time, same bat station.
All
So if there's nothing further, then a motion to adjourn or to terminate. John Crawley, thank you. And all in favor? So it's 3:58 according to my clock.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
right. Bye, James.
Everybody
Bye.
in March.
Brian,
Take care.
Brian, I also have Howard's book. I've worked with Howard for years. If you want me to go call through for any kind of information, just let me know if there's anything I can do to assist.
Okay. I've got his book as well. It's a great resource.
Yeah, just because I know you're busy with your other research too. So just let me know.
Thank